Yeah, the only thing I would add into that, and I've told my kids are tired of hearing me say this. If you come to a fork in the road where you have choices to make, take the one you've never done before. Just do it. I'm a pretty firm believer in you learn more from a defeat than you do a victory.
Welcome to Gratitude Geek. I'm Kandas Rodarte. Today I'm joined by the co-founder of Autio, a comprehensive library of location-based stories, Mr. Bill Werlin. Frequent listeners may not recognize his name, but I talk about Bill quite frequently on this show. Bill was the CEO of the North Face, and I went to work for them in 1991. I took away leadership and success lessons from Bill that have informed the way that I have run my own businesses since. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Candace. It's a pleasure to be here.
I can't wait to pick your brain in a completely different way. So tell
Well,
us.
let's hope there's still things in there to little gems of something.
Oh, I'm sure there are. So tell us your story. What have you been doing for the last 30 years?
30 years. Okay, we're going to have to reel that back a little bit. Well, there was almost 20 years spent with the North Face. That was one of the greatest pleasures or greatest fortunes is a better way to describe it. That was the start of an industry, really. I got started with the North Face in 1973 as an independent sales rep in the Rocky Mountains. I had 9 Western states that I drove around all the time. And actually, a little bit of that is part of the genesis of Autio. That had a direct influence on just the idea of the whole thing. But spent almost 20 years, last 5 years as president of the North Face. We'll continue beyond that. From there, we had a couple of little interesting, we tried a few business, had a little golf apparel company, had a little bicycle apparel company. My wife, Claudia, and I had decided that we wanted to expose our children. They were in 4th grade, and I think they were 10 and 11 years old or 9 and 10 years old. We wanted to expose them to different cultures. So a good friend, Michael Crook, had become CEO of Patagonia. And I called him up and just really, I wanted to see how he'd weathered the first few months down there in Ventura. And at the end of the conversation, I said, if anything ever comes up outside the United States, let me know. Literally 2 days later, he called back and he said, would that include Japan? And Claudia and I had been over there vis-a-vis the North Face and, somewhat of in a, not a normal tourist way, kind of a half business, half, I don't want to call it celebrity, but, going over to bring the North Face to the people over there. And we said, done, let's do it. So we signed up for 2 years. We came back 13 years later.
Oh, holy moly. That's a long time. So that means your kids grew up basically living in Japan.
They did. They went to an international school in Yokohama, Japan, and graduated 12th grade, and then came back to school in the U.S. And Claude and I continued another couple of years. I did 9 years with Patagonia over there, and then did 2 years Burton snowboards over there, running Burton snowboards, and then a couple of years doing teen footwear in Asia Pacific. And what brought us home finally was Claudia was the 2011 Fukushima earthquake.
Mm.
Both of us went through that, and a year after the earthquake, she had to use a small card telling her which prefectures were radioactive so that we didn't buy any food from them. And she came home one day and held it up and said, I don't think I need one of these at Safeway. Can we go home now? So that brought us back. And in the theory, that was back to retirement. However, I got a phone call from a fellow by the name of Woody Sears, who had an extensive background in the internet world. He started the first children's book on the internet, really had some fantastic experience and ideas. And I got a call from him. He wanted to have lunch one day in Santa Barbara. And we sat and had a great lunch, got to know each other a little bit. And at the end of the conversation, he said, if you ever had an idea that could work on the internet, let me know. And the idea that had been simmering in there for 25 or 30 years, rolled that out, and that became Autio. That became the whole deal. And so that literally occupied, I won't say 24/7, but it sure seemed like it. It was 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week as we got this thing rolling. And for me, it was a whole new experience in just the startup world and the tech internet world. It was incredible.
Well, it is such an innovative idea, and people love audiobooks. So this location-based stories is phenomenal. So explain what Autio is. And
Okay.
forgive me for pronouncing it incorrectly.
No, 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 no. It's perfect. Let me run you back a little bit. When I was very young, 14, 15, I guess, my grandfather was part of the state institutions government in Colorado. So he had to travel around Colorado and go to the prisons and the psychopathic wards and so on. And I became his driver. And I wasn't drafted. I certainly volunteered. And he was a running encyclopedia of stories. As we traveled along, we'd come into a little town. He said, "This town got its name because," and boom, out it would go. He was a rancher and a hard rock miner. And he would look at a mountainside and see the ore dumps going up, and he could tell which side the vein was on. Just this constant telling me what I was seeing out the front window. And so that's kind of how I grew up traveling, was having this, audible encyclopedia next to me. And when I went back out on the road, as I mentioned, as a salesman on the road, I'd be on these 4 and 5 hour stretches, and there was a palpable lack of information. I mean, I'd go through some of these little towns, and why do people live here? Or what do they do here?
Hmm.
Or how did the town get its name?
I still have those questions when I go on road trips.
Well, we can solve that for you. The original idea was a trifold brochure based on mile markers on this brand new thing that was happening in the US at that point called interstate highways. That gives you any indication time-wise.
Wow.
And so I was
That's
just
how
going to
long
write,
this idea has been simmering.
yep, yeah, how long it's been simmering.
It's never too late.
Well, it's never too late. And then literally the world changed and the technology changed that made it really feasible. The brochures, I literally was going to post them in 7-Elevens at state lines. When somebody crossed into a new state, you pick up the Colorado brochure. And as you went along I-70 or I-25, at various mile markers, there'd be a little paragraph and just tell you about that town or what you were seeing. And so the idea is we have gone out and we have located or gathered, if you will, these 3 to 5 minute stories, and that's 350 to 450 or 500 words. And we work the stories, we get them down to a kind of a format that we've determined, and we give each story a GPS coordinate. And around that coordinate, we set up an active range. So as you're driving and you enter the active range, the story starts to play. And what you're seeing out the window, you'll start hearing about it. Why does the Santa Ynez Mountains here in Santa Barbara run east-west instead of north-south? It's almost the singular mountain range in North America that runs east-west. And it's just, it's a Teutonic Mother Nature thing that she's pushing the Pacific and the North American Teutonic plates around, but that's the whole reason. So it's fun stuff. It's incredible.
You just told the story in 20 seconds instead of 3 to 5 minutes.
I can stretch it out a little bit.
In 1989, I was in college and I was taking a geology class, and it was a night course. And I'm talking on the phone to my friend Alice right before I had to head to class. And all of a sudden, the ground started shaking. And Alice and I, we're California girls. We're used to earthquakes. We're on the phone, and it's like we're having a conversation. And about 30 seconds later, we're both like, maybe we should hang up and get under a table.
Yeah.
So that was the Loma Prieta earthquake, the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. But the funny part about it was I had a test that night, and the test was on plate tectonics.
Mother Nature's trying to tell us something. Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't go to class that night.
I had a very funny experience. This is kind of off topic a little bit, but I had great designer, James Cox, and he was a wonderful designer at the North Face in those days, early days. And we were sitting around one afternoon, quaffing a few beers, and discussing the critical nature of the world at that point. And we started talking about weather and earthquakes and so on and so forth. And somebody piped up and said, yeah, well, we're starting to get a handle on this. We're being able to seed clouds and, determine what's going to happen and so on. He just kind of leaned back in his chair and kind of had a wry smile on his face. And he said, what happens is most people tend to forget Mother Nature always bats last. Mm. So just about the time the little human being thinks that we've got this under control, she'll rattle us just a bit, earthquakes or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so true. We got so off topic.
Well, sorry.
No, that's my fault. I started it. I wanted to, before we move too far in the future, my great-grandfather was a hard rock miner in Colorado and then Nevada, and eventually he became a state assemblyman in Nevada.
Knowledge gets handed down. I mean, that's literally one of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the tenets of Autio is the wisdom of the elders, the stories of the elders. Mm-hmm. And by far and away, the stories evaporate when, the elders go on to their next adventure.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible.
But there was a time where they didn't share their stories. Like it's so hard to get information before about 1920 or 1930. It's really difficult because people didn't share those stories. Like I found out through DNA that my dad's grandfather had 2 wives. There's a whole chain of family related DNA wise that nobody in my family knew existed.
The whole thing, the ancestry thing has opened up incredible doors, and literally around the world. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if I could do a second podcast, I think it would be about ancestry because it is so fascinating. Sure. Yeah, you bet. So fascinating. Okay, so that was the foundation of the story of Autio. So then you found some partners and you created this thing, and you even have some really amazing narrators. So what happened then? How did this all come together?
Before we get to narrators,
okay.
Woody lives here in Santa Barbara in a town called Montecito, and his 3 young kids, I guess, now at this point, were all going to a elementary school called Cold Spring School. There was another family that was going to that school. One of the husband's name was Kevin. The wife's name was Christine. Christine and Brooke, Woody's wife, got together just on the playground talking about what the individual husbands were doing. And Christine lit up and said, my husband would go crazy about this. He is a history nut. When we go driving, he'll see a historical marker sign and he'll pull over. And the kids all, oh, geez, Dad, one of these kind of things. But it's him. Turns out that Kevin, his last name is Costner. And so he became the 3rd co-founder. There were 3 of us that got this thing rolling. And he has been unbelievably good, both in terms of providing great narration on some different, there's 2 formats. One is the regular format in Autio, and the other one is his format. So the regular format is that 3.5 to 5 minute thing that I mentioned to you. Kevin has gone through and starting in the US, and his one request to join the group, if you will, or join Woody and I, is that he wanted to tell the story of the indigenous peoples before the foreigners came or the Euros came, what happened when they did, which is pretty dark, really, no matter where you dig into it.
Yeah.
And where are those sections of the country now? So he has taken Southern California, Central California, the Northwest, the Midwest, the Rocky Mountains, et cetera. And each one of those areas has a 15 to 18 minute resuscitation of Costner telling those exactly through that. It's remarkable.
Oh, I bet. I can't wait to dig in. I downloaded the app today. I was really embarrassed to tell you that I hadn't downloaded the app yet the last time we talked. I downloaded the app today, and I cannot wait for us to do a road trip so that we can dig in and listen. But
Candace, one quick thing.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. You don't have to be on a road trip. You can sit right there in your office and go to places that you've always wanted to visit, or places you want to go and go get stories.
that's
JetBlue,
even better.
yeah, JetBlue has put it on the airlines to, and so whatever destination that the plane is headed toward, they put that on the airplay in the airplane, so you can hear the stories of where you're headed.
That's one of the things I was going to talk to you about this. One of the things that I used to love back in the day when I would fly for the North Face, or the job that I had after that, was when the pilot would tell us what we were looking at below.
Yeah,
And they don't do that anymore.
it's coming.
Uh,
It's part and parcel. I think, that's been one of our dreams is, and sadly what you get is you get only the people on the windows.
yeah.
That's
But
better than
with
that.
but with Autio, everybody can hear the story. They
They
just
can hear
can't
the story.
necessarily
I
see it.
mean, yeah, I can't really look down, but it'll make, I think it'll really be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoy flying on small planes where you can actually see out the window from no matter where you're sitting. You know? I like those little tiny planes. I know,
Yeah.
I'm weird. I'm excited to hear that they are on JetBlue and it's maybe rolled out to other airlines. Are you going to let that slip, or
Well, there might be discussion.
there may be some discussion happening that we
Yeah.
there's a reason to fly JetBlue, right?
Yeah. No, it's, yeah, I mean, we're looking at trains, same thing, as the people
Oh,
traveling along.
oh, that's
There's
lovely.
there's a lot of opportunities. Buses, I still think buses would be great, but it's kind of a uh, disjointed marketplace right now on that.
Yeah.
So,
But
but
I imagine that the people on the bus could have the app themselves without being, you
yeah,
know, and really when you're on a bus, you can actually see. I mean, you were telling me the last time we chatted, that you and Claudia like to go on motorcycle trips and that Claudia gets to see the terrain and you get to see the road. So, when you're driving, you don't necessarily get to see all the fun things. But my favorite thing to happen is when we get lost, right? If we accidentally take the wrong road, like, or there's a detour that we don't know about ahead of time. My husband and I ended up driving Interstate 70 in Utah for accidentally. We were trying to get home to Texas from Salt Lake City, and we were headed towards Colorado because we wanted to drive through Colorado, and there was road construction. The road was blocked, and so they diverted us 2.5 hours out of our way to
mhm.
Interstate 70, and it was the most glorious road trip we have ever taken. It was so beautiful. We stopped at every overlook. So beautiful. And I bet you that the stories that go with that, the Kevin
Oh,
Costner stories that may go with that.
Costner's, the geography. We have one of the categories is natural wonders, which is all encompassing of flora, fauna, geology, and so on. Have you heard that book, Blue Highways?
No,
Oh,
looking it up
check it out.
now.
Yeah, check it out. Blue Highways is a story about a guy who just said, "All right, I'm going only on those other roads and get off the interstates." You mentioned our motorcycle rides. That's exactly what we do. We don't get onto the autobahns. We don't get onto the interstates. We don't get onto these super highways. We go off onto the little bitty roads, and number one is always looking for the scenic roads. It's just remarkable. I mean, gratitude. If we jump a little bit ahead. Gratitude to live on a place that is magnificent as Earth. I mean, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
truly amazing. And when you can really enjoy it like you guys did, you stop, get out, and just take a big deep breath and say, "Holy cow,
Yeah.
where are we?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is an interstate. It's Interstate 70. I mean, it's a major interstate from coast to coast, right? But we were we didn't expect it. We didn't even know a place on the planet existed that looked like this. It was so glorious. I can't even describe how gloriously beautiful it was. So, I mean, just it took our breath away every time we got out of the car,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that whole stretch, really the stretch from Denver west. uh, when you're looking for magnificent vistas and so on.
Hmm.
And but every road has its own persona, really.
Yeah.
Visual,
Well,
let's call it a visual persona.
well, this country, I mean, just the United States itself is filled with wonders.
Yep.
And you don't normally see them when you're not looking, you
Or
know?
your head is down on your phone as
Hmm.
you're cruising along. I mean, that's we've had a lot of feedback about from parents saying the kids have their heads up out of the phone and they're listening to the story and checking it out outside.
Oh, yeah.
And it's created great conversations within the car about, then just literally just starting conversations that can flow anywhere. But they were excited about what had happened there.
Hmm. We did road trips when I was a kid every summer. Every summer we would take a road trip. And that was the best part of the summer was seeing new things,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's just, and I don't think families do road trips like that anymore. Do they? I don't know. We
Um,
didn't do, I mean, our family, when our daughter's 25, so, this is 20 years ago, we went camping a lot that, I don't, we didn't do a lot of road trips.
hmm. It's relative to the parts of the country,
Yeah. And we
you know.
lived in Texas. There's no road tripping in Texas. It's too hot.
Well, and it takes a month to go anywhere. So
That's true too.
yeah, it's a time constraint on that, kid.
That is true too. Oh my gosh. Now, I live in Michigan now, and I'm in the middle of, I'm about equal distance from Detroit and Chicago. So Chicago's a little bit farther than Detroit is. But in Texas, it was like, everything was really far away. Dallas was far away. I lived in Houston. Dallas was far, San Antonio was far away. Everything was far away. And here, it's just I could be in Chicago in 2 or 3 hours, which is about what it would have taken me to get to Dallas from Houston. But it's so much nicer to drive
Oh,
there.
there's green.
There's
Yeah.
this lake.
Yeah, there's little
There's
water
this,
out there.
there's this tiny little lake
Hmm.
and that was the other thing that I'd never been to Michigan. Well, my husband and I had brought our daughter up before his father died, like 20 years ago. So, but I'd never really been to Michigan. I had no idea that Lake Michigan had beaches like that rival California beaches. Didn't know that.
You and I'll discuss that.
Oh,
Yeah.
you don't agree?
No, no, no. It's just being smart about the California beaches. There's some wonderful beaches up there, and there's some fabulous stories all around the Great Lakes.
Mm,
And the whole, it's very funny actually. We started Autio in California. So we started here. We did 1,000 stories up through California, just proving the concept, making sure we could do it, and so on. And then we just spread our way across the US, right? We just tracked up the West Coast, came back down through the mountain states, ran across the southern US, and then curled back up the Atlantic coast and New England, et cetera. And out here, the volume of stories, the greater volume of stories all started about 1849, or, call it the early 1800s,
hmm.
the gold rush. I mean, there were the stories of the Spanish before that and the stories of the Chumash, but things really started popping out here in the early 1800s.
Hmm.
Then as you move into the West, or you moved into the Rockies, you picked up 50 years. And then as you moved into the Midwest, you picked up 100 years of story depth. And then we get to the East Coast, and I mean, we could say 1492. So let's say we pick up 500 years of stories. We go over to Europe, and when Claude and I ride through Europe, we did a wonderful tour in Turkey last year, a motorcycle ride down northwestern Turkey. And our guide, great guy, he lives in Istanbul and was educated in the U.S. And Kaz goes, "Yeah, well, this is 3500 BC. Wait, let me calculate this. This is 5,000
1,000
years
years ago.
So I just start laughing. I go, okay, we had a well of information in the US. I got an ocean of
Oh,
information when we
yeah.
finally over to Europe. Yeah,
So have you expanded into Europe? Has
we
Autio?
have.
Okay.
Yeah, it's slow because you deal with the languages and so on. But we just added almost 1,000 stories month before last, and
Wow.
so it's pretty cool. It's coming along great.
So basically, if you don't get to travel, you can just listen to Autio and you can travel.
And I don't mean this as a sales pitch or anything other than what it is, but
You can you can pitch
we've
it.
no, but we've had commentary from elder people that are living in home care type things, and they enjoy just go out in the sun and listen to these things,
Oh,
listen to where they used to live, and the best thing is when they'll listen to a story and go, I lived there my whole life and I never knew this. When that happens, that's a check mark. That's
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
I often tell people that I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area for 6 or 7 years and never went to Alcatraz. Not once.
Yeah.
Not once. And I lived in California I'm a California girl. I lived there and we never went to Alcatraz. My dad was born in San Francisco. His great uncle was the person who identified the location of Alcatraz.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
His last name starts with an E. I have to, it'll be in the show notes, y'all, because his story is really interesting too. It starts with an E.
When you ride BART over to the East Bay, you
Hmm.
go through the hull of an old ship. I mean, all of that down by Fisherman's Wharf and to the south from there was all ships were sunk to actually
Oh,
act to stake out land. So that became your land, and it all became landfill. So there's all these old hulls of ships down under the water. Water. It's
and
just
that's where they ran the BART through?
Yeah, well, the BART had to get through, so
Yeah.
apparently, it goes through one
Well,
old
then you don't
hull.
have to dig anything. I mean, the thing that I was disappointing about BART was that there weren't any windows. So when we
Yeah,
went under the water, we didn't know we were under the water. It was kind of, but but I loved BART. When I moved to Houston, it was the number one thing that frustrated me more than anything else was the lack of rapid transit.
yeah,
A
yeah.
city this big, I have to drive. Really, I have to drive to get to where I want to go.
It's yeah, it's that's yeah. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Totally.
It doesn't make sense when there isn't rapid transit. So,
Yeah.
okay, so there are stories all over the world in Autio. There are more stories coming. Where do you find your narrators? Where do you find the stories?
The stories, the way we got going is I went through every state and just took a really hard look at the road infrastructure and determined where the greatest traffic flow was. And it generally, it's kind of like it's a pyramid graphic, if you will. At the top is interstates, and then you get the U.S. highways, U.S. 101, et cetera. Then kind of wrapped in there is scenic highways, thing, and because that's more related to exactly what we were doing. And then it went down to state roads, then down to county roads, and then, you know, the farmland. So identified each one of those. And then I had two people, and this was the early group that we put together to do the US, excuse me. Had two people that I would say, okay, we want to do I-70 from Denver to Grand Junction. So they would go to Google search, they would go to Wikipedia, they would go to state of Colorado, et cetera. And they would just look at every little town all the way across. They would pull it up on, for instance, Wikipedia was great. Wikipedia has always a capsulization or an overview at the top. And then it breaks it down into history and demographics and notable people and et cetera. So each one of those is a possible story, depending
Mm-hmm.
on who, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they would identify these stories and they would hand it to another three people, and these people would go and gather 800 to 1200 or 800 to 1500 words and do some verification. So they would look at an alternate source just to make sure that we're trying to be as close to it as we can.
Yeah.
That became what we called the acorn. So the acorn was then handed to writers, and generally we picked the writers from the outdoor business and the travel business, where they had a just we and we went through a few, to get kind of the crew that we needed. And they would distill it down to the 300 to 500, 350 to 500. And once that went through, then it would come back through me again. I'd read through the story but minor stuff, because these guys and gals were great.
Mm-hmm.
And then off to the narrators. So I did a fair amount. I think I got up close to four figures worth of stories. We found a fellow in Tennessee, a guy by the name of Chris Brinkley, who's a audio professional. And then he knew people, and I know a person, I know a lady, I know, one of these things, and we distilled it down where people would say, that's a good voice. Classic, well, no, a classic example, but it was found by my brother. And I don't know where he found it. A fellow by the name of W.F. Strong lives down in Brownsville, Texas, and he's a professor emeritus at the University of Texas. And he seriously looks just like Ernest Hemingway, just white beard, white hair, just this, and he has this gravelly old Texas voice. You can look him up on Texas Public Radio and listen to his stories, and they are off the charts. Just great old Texas. Why does Texas love pickups? It's these kind of stories. And so we've had those. We had John Lithgow.
Oh,
Loved what
fun.
we were doing. He sent in stories. He sent in 10 stories just to
Really?
place them in. Yeah. Phil Jackson, the basketball coach, gave us stories on Madison Square Garden and Chicago Arena and Staples Center in Los Angeles, and he lives in Montana. He gave us some Montana stories. I mean, it's when the switch flips with somebody, it's just like, I want in.
Yeah.
It's
So
fun.
basically, Bill Werlin did what Bill Werlin does, and he created a community of people interested in the story, in storytelling.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's where it ended up. Yeah.
There's a reason why you were at the helm of many, many well-known brands, and you did such an amazing job. You were a remarkable leader. Can I gush on you now?
This
So,
is your show. We don't want to get too deep.
so there are two stories that I like to tell about you. I'm going to tell them to you now. There was
Okay.
this one time where you and I pulled into the parking lot at the North Face at the same time. And you were driving a car that was not the same car you were driving the last time I saw you driving. And I pop out of the car, you pop out of the car at the exact same time, and I said, Bill, you got a new car. And you said, new to me. And that taught me something about success, and that success doesn't have to be flashy. The CEO of one of the most well-known brands in the outdoor industry did not buy a brand new car. And I haven't bought a brand new car since. Because success doesn't mean the car you drive. Success is the teams that you can pull together.
The example I used a lot and still do is, and I use it mostly in a retail setting for retail employees. I said, a customer walks in your store, they may know the brand, but the brand is, well, you can take North Face, and me, or the other one is Patagonia is a good example. Yvon Chouinard, right? So, and he is a beacon. I mean, that is a very remarkable guy. But the brand takes shape, or the brand becomes the brand with the person the customer meets in the store.
Mm.
The first person they meet in the store, they're the ones doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in the offices at 999 Harrison,
Mm-hmm.
and Bill Werlin, yeah, big deal. Who's that? Does he mop floors? Who is it?
Mm-hmm.
But the person who said hello, how's it going, having a good day in the retail store, sets the tone for the brand and the product and the relationship with the individual customer. And
Mm-hmm.
every customer has a relationship, or has the opportunity for a relationship.
Which is why the North Face was so good at training the people in the stores who were buying the product to resell. I mean, that was phenomenal, the amount of training that the employee at the retail store that was buying the product from the North Face at wholesale was getting. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, that was it. That's, when we talk about things, it was just, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the gratitude, if you will, of being in an industry that was nascent.
Hmm.
In 1973, it was just starting to coalesce. I think the North Face was doing $3 million a year, at that $4 million a year, maybe at that point, and primarily California, a little bit of Oregon, a little bit of Washington. That was it.
Hmm. And now look at it. I don't even know what the numbers are for the company now.
It's up
It's
in the billions.
I see the brand everywhere. I mean, and I sometimes I go, I used to work for them, you know. And it was such a good time. It
It was
was
a great time.
the early 90s were a fantastic time to work for that company. It was watching something grow. It was like being it must be like what startup, internet startup companies feel like now, watching what happened to that company from I mean, I worked there for 5 years, and from 91 into 96 it transformed into something phenomenal. Like when I first went to work for the company, it was a brand that was well respected, and when I left, it was a nationwide brand that everybody knew
Yeah.
in 5 years.
Yeah. It's, when it started in 73, and this just is, I consider it great fortune. I mean, or extreme luck, or whatever would be the apt term for it. But this was the start of an industry.
Hmm.
Before you could buy, quote unquote, camping, but it was army surplus, old green tents and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so Berkeley, Boulder, actually, Southern California, and Seattle were the epicenters of the outdoor industry. And primarily Berkeley had the greatest number of brands. Then down south, you had Kelty, you had Wilderness Experience down there, you had JanSport up in Washington, Frostline, Hollybar, et cetera, Alpine Designs, I think, over in Boulder. And those 4 points this industry grew up,
Hmm.
and it was competitive for sure. And everybody started, the starting line was pretty darn equal. It was all just a bunch of outdoor ragamuffins that said, "Oh, yeah, I can make a backpack. Man, no problem.
Hmm.
We'll get this."
Hmm.
And
But when you start with people who actually do if a backpacking company is founded by backpackers, they're creating backpacks for their needs,
correct. And
you
have a
know.
sensitivity to the customers. It's not fake, I guess that would be the right word. It's not, uh, well, it's it, fake. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the best term for it. Yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
And if you can see it and feel it, the communication of the philosophy, the communication of, well, one thing that I used a lot over the course of time is that any product you buy has three components, really: design, workmanship, and materials. So you lay that alongside the good, better, best rating on products, right?
Hmm.
Or they're perceived to be in the marketplace. So if you use a reasonable design, you put it together pretty well, and you use, the materials are good, you'll have a good product. If you use a great design, and if you use materials directly related to the performance of the design to facilitate the design and what you're intending to do, uh, and the workmanship is, you use the double stitch, or instead of a single stitch, and those three, if you work those through, and this is a little bit of what I would have the retail people when they got into a good discussion with a customer, is to point out each one of those three things, and draw them together for the benefit of the customer. So the customer really could feel what we were trying to accomplish with the product. Made a big difference.
Yeah. So here's the difference between 91 and 96. This was after you left. So in 95-ish, a jacket was released from the North Face, and they didn't do a very good job of explaining that this was a wind jacket and not a rain jacket. And the number of calls that the service department had to field because people were getting wet when they were wearing this jacket in the rain. You know, it was not rolled out very
Pretty.
well. This jacket was not rolled out very well. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's not a rain jacket.
No, and that happens. Just you and I are, we've got the outdoor industry tattoo, but
Yeah.
it applies to any industry, really. I don't know whether it's sadly or it's just natural evolution of a product or an industry that pretty soon it just goes to numbers and you lose, or it evaporates. Maybe is other way to do it is, the financial results for the first quarter overtake the integrity of the brand.
Yeah. And that's always sad when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My second Bill Werlin story that I tell often on the show.
Yeah.
Every time the North Face would sponsor an event or would make a first ascent of a mountain somewhere, somewhere around the globe, you would always walk around the office on Monday morning with an armful of t-shirts, and you would personally hand a t-shirt to every single person in that office. It didn't happen after you left. That never happened after you left. But what you were doing when you did that was you were making eye contact and creating a relationship with every single person who worked for you. And we were loyal to you, and we were loyal to the North Face. And it was such a simple gesture.
Well, it goes back to what what you and I talked about is you guys were the one doing the work. I'm sitting up there answering phones, and it's, yeah, and I don't mean to be so self-effacing, but it is, if you can turn it into a team, a collective interest in making the business work. A term I use a lot is psychological compensation, where somebody goes home at the end of the day with a paycheck in hand and, I got paid today, bam. But you know what else my company did today, or you know what else it did today, so that there was this, so there's and that a lot of that stemmed out of the focus of the North Face and Patagonia and the other great brands on the environment and everything we were trying to do for the environment and for the planet Earth. But it also applies to just the day-to-day contact where you and I, when I come through with a t-shirt or something, we're in this together. It's not just you guys against the world and I'm up in the Erie up on the second floor.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was such a beautiful office. Man, those of us who'd been around for a while, really, we were so disappointed when we moved to San Leandro. The office in San Leandro was so hideous.
I got down there a couple of times to see lovely Ann Kerchak, and I kind of went,
Yeah, it wasn't the same. It wasn't, the culture shifted. Did you ever know Marty Kaysen?
Yeah.
You did? The third story I tell about the North Face is about Marty, and I'm going to share it here because we're talking about this period of my life, right? So my third story, when Marty first came to the North Face as CEO, we were having a company picnic, which we'd never had this. We had this catered company picnic, and we knew the culture of the company was shifting because this was a hoity-toity catered picnic, right? And Marty walks over to the table where I'm sitting at, and he sits right next to me and says, "What do you do?" And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "I'm making millions of dollars," because, I was a cocky 25-year-old girl, right?
Yeah.
He and I had a really good relationship. And there was a job opening that happened in Canada. And I knew that where I was in the company, I wasn't going to go anywhere. I knew I wasn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And this job in Canada would have been perfect for me. And I sat and stewed over it, thinking, God, I really want this job in Canada. And I sat on it for probably 2 weeks, just thinking about it. And finally, I walked into Marty's office. I walked into his office, which, takes a lot. Again, I was a ballsy 25-year-old girl, right?
Yeah.
I walked into his office after 2 weeks, and I said, "Marty, I really want the job in Canada." And he goes, "That is an excellent idea. I'll make a phone call." And the next day he came down to my desk in my little cubicle, and he told me that he had made the phone call and the position had already been filled.
Ooh.
So I'm 25 years old, right, at this point in my life. I'm 25 years old.
Yep.
I learned that I waited too long, that I should have taken action immediately when I got that instinct that I was perfect for this job. And that you can ask for what you want, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
I worked in the territory sales management department, right? I was a territory sales manager. I didn't report to anybody that reported to him. I mean, there was like 3 levels of management at that point between us. But
Yeah.
I knew he was a good guy, and I knew I could walk into his office. But it took me too long to do it. It took me too long to do it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add into that, and I've told my kids are tired of hearing me say this. If you come to a fork in the road, where you have choices to make, take the one you've never done before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just do it. I'm pretty firm believer in you learn more from a defeat than you do a victory. If you've been down a road, yeah, you want to have in a company, you want to have some people that have that historical viewpoint or that historical knowledge. But I think where you really want to pay attention to is the new roads that you haven't been down. Be smart enough to avoid potholes when you see them. But it's the exploration of both, and we're speaking in terms of business, it's the exploration of the business marketplace, world, product, etc. That's where the great successes will come, particularly if you have just this coordinated team that's all rocking and supporting each other.
If you don't ever fail, how do you know when you're winning?
That's correct.
Yeah. So how do people find Autio?
It's been app of the day on Apple 4 times now.
Wow, that's groovy.
You can actually just go travel app on the App Store and it'll pop right up.
It's AUTIO and it's available on Apple and Android.
Correct.
Excellent. And it doesn't matter where you are, you can listen to stories from anywhere on the globe. That's correct. That is so awesome. All right. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I am at your behest, madam. Whatever you would like to have someone, extend on.
This has been an absolute thrill for me. I really appreciate that you took this time and that you actually remembered who I was after all these years. Thank you.
Oh, happy to do it. I congratulate you on what you've got going. It's fun. It's great. It's exceptional.
It is fun, and I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't said yes to a job at a company in an industry that I wasn't comfortable in.
Yeah,
to be honest with.
Down in the flatlands of Berkeley. There you go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's a lot. I had to say yes to a lot of things to get to where I am today. So thank you. All right, Bill Werlin, this is your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
Oh, yeah. See, you should have given this to me 2 weeks ago. I am most grateful for just the opportunities that were a collective effort, were a collective deal of the cards with no predisposition that gave me the chance to live the life I've lived. And that's not just a self-focus. It's the people that I've associated with that have come into my life. I try and keep as many of the ones as possible, even if there's been a long interim between them, just you and I, other old prior to North Face, prior to moving to California, et cetera. But just the incredible kaleidoscope of people, places, events that I've been fortunate to be involved or be there with. It's overwhelming in that particular when I think about it.
Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, the podcast for grateful micropreneurs building genuine, lasting relationships with clients, colleagues, and community. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Soul Lily. To connect with Bill Werlin and Autio, head over to the show notes at gratitudegeek.com. This is episode 240. I've been your host, Kandas Rodarte. Stay groovy, my friends.
Kandas, it has been a distinct pleasure. And to you and all of your listeners, stay groovy, my friends.
I know we can make it easy.